Everyone. Hopefully we're all live. Well, hopefully people, I'm just looking to see people are popping on. We've got quite a few registered for the session, so we'll wait till a couple minutes till everybody seems to be popping on. So I was sharing the weather with everyone. Those of you that have competed in the past at our games, you know that the weather has been horrendous the last 2 years. Heavy rains, winds, and we've even had almost snowflakes. So as I'm sitting here, the weather is beautiful, there's not much wind, and it's sunny, and it's gonna be that way all weekend. So, you know, and we're all here with the virtual games. So, for those of you that don't know, I am Cindy Hausner, and I'm the Executive Director of Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association, and I'm also the Games Director, this year Virtual Games Director, which those of you that know me, IT is not my strength, and I'm also one of the track coaches here at GLASA. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors that are up on the screen right now for supporting our games. And before I introduce our speakers for the evening, I have a few housekeeping events. First of all, in order to avoid the background noise, all of our attendees are muted for the moment. If you have questions for the panelists, there'll be a opportunity after, and make sure that you put that in the question and answer button instead of the chat. And then we'd like to know who you are that are out there. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and make sure that it's shared to panelists and attendees. So again, we would like to see who we have on. I'd like at this point to introduce our moderator, who many of you may know, Kathy Sellers, who's the former director of US Paralympics. The name of the session tonight is Welcome to the Realities of World Para Athletic Rankings, Bridging the Gap. And I also, when I was looking through the attendees, I also see that Sharice Fox from United States Paralympics is on. So Sharice, welcome. And as we get into questions and answers, please feel free to, you know, give us your input and info and share. So Kathy, at this point, do you want to introduce David and we can get the session going?
Yes, first off, thank you to GLASA for putting this on. It's really important at this time and at any time that we have an opportunity to try to educate people about the processes of Paralympics, because it's a little bit different than the traditional world. But speaking of which, David Gregg is going to be talking about bridging that gap and understanding Paralympics and the IC and the rankings and how they come about. And David is well versed in this. He spent about, well, 21 years or so in the para world. So he's very active in it and has been involved for a very long time. He's also one of the great team leaders that we've had. So he understands rules and nuance and the process as a coach, as the process of getting athletes to that level. So take it away.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Cindy, for hosting this. I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. See if we can, is that going to work here? Oh, all right. Oops, I went to the wrong one. Quick to the start. Here we go. All right. So I'm David Gregg. I'm with Parasport Spokane, and some of you might know me or have seen me at some of the events and some of the clinics. I've been out to Chicago a couple times to do some of the Gateway to Gold clinics, and we were at the GLASA Games last year. I was just saying to Cindy that weather last year of the rain and cold prepared a lot of the athletes for Lima. So for those of you who were in Lima, will understand that. Specifically today, looking forward to this education session, bit of a conversation, and excited to have Kathy here as well to talk about the realities of World Parathletics rankings and then just bridging the gaps. So the understanding from this is that rankings aren't something to be feared. Rankings aren't something to intimidate. Rankings are a tool for you to use and to utilize to become better athletes, to set better goals, and to build a vision of where you can be and what you can become in the future. Myself, as I said, David Gregg, I'm with Parasports Spokane. It's my 21st year coaching. I've coached at 4 Paralympic Games, most recently in Rio with Team USA, but prior to that, I was with the Canadian team. I was the national coach for talent development with the Canadian Paralympic track and field team for 5 years. So we all work with athletes, or you are an athlete, and the one of the hardest things for coaches or any human relationship is when expectation does not meet reality. That builds conflict, that builds hard communications, that builds hard conversations, that builds disappointment. So this next piece that we're going to talk about with WPA rankings, WPA's World Parathletics, involves that, and just what are some better questions we can ask, or what tools do we have to be able to set better goals down the road. Some of this is going to be kind of instructions showing you how to find things, kind of the minutiae of those details. Others are going to get into how you can use these tools to better plan and better program down the road. And then some questions. What are, the term I'll use is gap analysis. What are those gaps between where you might currently reside on the ranking or where you want to be? So how do you start filling those gaps? So some assumptions from me as to what's going on here, who's here, para-athletes and coaches. There might be some parents on the phone call, maybe some administrators on this as well. People who are genuinely wanting to understand and to improve, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, or even a parent providing for your child. That's what we're going to kind of peel back some layers here to look at. My goals are to define the World Parathletics rankings, show you how to find them, where to get them, how to use them as a tool, and then looking at some of those keys to success, as I said. We'll also get into, at the end of this, what is happening in the USA. So what are there rankings available? How can you use them? What do Team USA standards look like? How can you use them? Those kinds of things as well. We also ask you to hold your questions to the end, but put them into the Q&A box as well. And so we're going to address those once we're done with this. So why are rankings important? As I said, they're a tool, right? They're not there to make you scared. They're not there to intimidate. They're important because they provide a factual analysis of what the performance landscape in the world looks like, specifically World Parathletics rankings. So all this first part is World Parathletics rankings. Athletes have to be licensed and classified to be on the World Parathletics ranking. They have to have a World Parathletics classification. So in the USA, that's the Desert Challenge. Typically, will be a classification event. And if you do not have that classification and the license, you will not appear on the rankings. No other athlete in the world can appear on the rankings until they are licensed and classified. They're a good tool for long-term planning. So as I'll show you, there's a number of years of data online that you could be able to access. From a World Parathletics standpoint, they look at those competitive histories in determining what events will be offered in the future. So there is a bit of a sliding scale as to what events are offered at some games, but the World Parathletics tries to plan that at minimum 4 years in advance, if not 6 to 8 years in advance. They're used to set standards. So Team USA uses World Parathletics rankings to set standards. A lot of other countries around the world will use World Parathletics standards to set rankings. Some states use them as guidelines to set their entry standards into their state meets in track and field as well too. They provide a scope of a competitive landscape, so you can see, hey, is my classification, is it really competitive? Are there 4 or 5 athletes that are really stellar at this event? But then what does it look like behind them? What's the next 15 athletes on the list? So you really get a picture of that. And then if you track that over time, you can see how competitive that event is, whether it's one that's really taking off performance-wise or whether it's one that's kind of flatlined, those kinds of things. Can you notice a technological advancement or something like that along those lines. And is a consistent mechanism. So prior to 2008, there was not a really consistent mechanism to know what athletes were doing around the world. Even 2008 to 2010, it was still a little fuzzy. But World Parathletics has provided these rankings to be able to consistently show those things. So just utilizing it, and you know it's going to be there. So what are the downfalls of this system? Any performance on this list has to be at a World Parathletics endorsed or sanctioned competition, okay? So if you're a high school athlete and you didn't fill out the form, but you have a license and a classification, there's a competition form to fill out through US Paralympics. And if those results aren't noted and they're not sent on, it won't appear on the rankings list. It's a single capture of competitors. So on some rankings lists with the IAAF, for an example, or World Athletics, if you click on an athlete's name, you'll get their whole performance history. Unfortunately, World Parathletics doesn't have that feature. So you just get one performance from that athlete, their best performance of the year. So it's a little bit challenging. That's why you'll see if you download the rankings in an Excel file, you can cut and paste and create graphs and those kinds of things, so you can get creative about it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Again, only one result, but you also don't know what was the weather like at that result. You can see what the wind reading is. That will help. But was it favorable weather, or was it a cold day? And this, if an athlete that you're competing against performed really well on a cold day, oh my goodness, what are they going to do on a warm day, maybe, if their weather is better for them? Where else have these athletes competed? For me, I was a 400-meter hurdler as an athlete. I knew it took me 7 races to run my best race that year. For Desert Challenge being in May, that's an early season meet for some athletes. For my high school athletes, you're right in the thick of it. So is that athlete, where are they during their season? Where are they during their phasing and their periodization? So that's something that you can't capture from this system. The timeliness of updates, they're a lot better with it now at World Parathletics because they have more staff, but often those updates are delayed. We ran into trouble with Team Canada because we had the update or the World Parathletics ranking list as one of the key pieces of the puzzle based on this time and this date. But some of the results weren't there, and we knew there were results, so we had to really work that to figure that out. So, all right, some insights here. Again, with these rankings, there's not a capture of that athlete's training landscape. Okay, and that's where there are some programs, there's other athletes in the US, through social media, you might be able to get a picture of that to understand where an athlete's training, how are they training. Some other athletes in the US might know those individuals, so, or they might even be someone else in the US. So who are you talking to figure that out? What does that look like for them? So, but you can't tell that from rankings list, or it's just a number and a name. In para-athletics, there are few opportunities to see competitors truly. For an athlete who, you know, might be in a double above the knee amputee who runs, or is a long jumper, you might not compete against these competitors until World Championships or Paralympic Games. There may not be other athletes in your classification locally that you can compete against, or even nationally in some circumstances. Very few anymore, but some circumstances. So there's very few opportunities to see what people are doing, what their level of fitness is, what's their training regime, how are they warming up, cooling down, talking to them about their strength programs. So through a rankings list, it's very hard to see that, to understand what others are doing. Now the rankings list helps us understand Team USA standards. So for the 2020 standards, the 3rd rank and the 5th rank are A and B. Okay, so that makes it a lot easier. There are some that are a little bit different, but throughout, for the most part, that's the rule of thumb that was adhered to for Tokyo 2020. Okay. So this is the very basic stuff coming up here, folks. I'm going to walk you through this. So for those of you who might not have been on World Parathletics, it's paralympic.org/athletics. And you want to go to the results page right here. You're going to click on rankings. Then once you get to rankings, look at all these different ranking types that you can pull up. So typically I just use World Rank. I'll often use the Americas rank. So with Para-Pan Am Games, just get a landscape of what things were happening. So that's just the Americas region. The other ones you can play around with and have a look at. We don't really use them a whole lot. Grand Prix rankings, annual recorded best performances. Now minimum entry standards applies to major events, and that will apply to Tokyo. There's a minimum entry standard that's published by World Parathletics. For the most part, there might be very few circumstances where that will come into play with Team USA selection. So not really worried about that one a whole lot. Now you have your rankings list. Yes, Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, recorded best performance. Yeah, that annual best recorded is typically for athletes who are licensed but have not gotten their classification yet.
Okay.
Sometimes they will show up in that annual best list, and it gives you an indicator of who's out there that might not be on the ranking list.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome, David.
So you see right here, you've got all these years to choose from, and that even scrolls down even further. So you can click on your year that you want. Now the next little bit, there's indoor rankings as well. There was a World Indoors in 2007. They didn't do that since. Just there's not enough athletes competing indoors to justify that cost. Age grouping, so for World Juniors, you might want to get a capture of where you reside in your classification compared to your peers, U20, U17, or Open. Gender, okay, you can get really specific with this. So if you're a woman in 2019, in the Americas region, U17, you can see who else is in there competing at a similar age as you. All right, now here is all the events. So you can just be as specific as, say, 200 meters for the 63 class, 62 class, or 5,000 meters for the T54 class, which there's a caveat to that as well too. So I will talk about that in a second. And then all the classifications. So you're gonna scroll down here and find what classification you want. So, or you can just go all. You see it says all there, so it'll pull up every classification for you. Now I have on my iPad and on my laptop every year I save the ranking list in its entirety. It's over 300 pages long, so it's a big data file. Okay, so if you want that, if you need that, that's something to hang on to. Or if you're looking at something really specific, just use this, and it'll just be a simple 1 or 2 sheets that'll come out. You can format your reports either using HTML, which means it'll pop up on your screen. I typically use PDF because then I can use the search function on it. But if I'm running a database or running statistical analysis at all, I'll use an Excel format. So then you can actually pull that information and then you can move it around, manipulate it, create graphs and those kinds of things. And as far as XML goes, that's just a means of transferring more information to other websites and databases. Okay, so this is a typical report. So this is the Americas rankings for 2019. So you see the headings, got all this. You can define the periods, start time and end time, or it tells you that. That's the full year right there. And then you've got your gender, event, classification. The rank, so where you reside on that, name, NPC, National Paralympic Committee, which will be the 3-letter acronym for it, the birth year, the time or distance, the wind reading, the date of that performance, and then the city that that performance was captured in. And then lastly is the country. So you see here, we got Jody Putnam, race runner, men's 100 meters, born 2001, 33:57, ranked number 2. And then his the date of the performance, and then city and country. Now, the one thing that doesn't pull up with these is you'll have to combine some classifications. You can't, there's not the means, so say you're a seated thrower that has a 53-54 shot put event per se. You'll have to pull up both and then combine the results to see where you'll fall within that. So that's where I would use the Excel output format. Or now if you're a 44/64, so you have to make sure those are captured. So some strategies you can utilize. Using a specific data set, as I showed you, you could be as specific as the 100 meters for the T11 classification. Males, and you choose a region, so America's region or in the world. Or you can even do an age group, right? You can compare and contrast. So if you look at years, or you can compare just events over years, or if you go like see which athletes are racing the 100 and might not be racing the 200 or something like that. See if people are specializing or focusing. You can track trends. So that's something we can look at. Typically the year before or the year of Paralympic Games, most of the high performance results, the top results are from the games themselves. The year before, there's usually a couple big events that you'll see athletes will come together. European Championships happens. So, you know, just looking at those time frames. You can capture that competitive landscape so you can see what the depth of field looks like. So say you want to, say you're sitting at 25th rank in the world and you want to get to 15th, or you want to see what that jump has to be able to get there. All right, so this is kind of a show of what, just to show how you can compare. So this is the men's T11 100 meters, and then I've got, just to show the ranks annually, 2016, so there, 2017, 2018, this is not, so now they added the race runners as the first ones when you pull up the full report. 2019, 2020. So if you've got those annual breakdowns, you're going to be able to pull that information if you wish. So this is just an example of an event progression and what you're able to pull out of these this database. All right, so in 2016, you'll see this is a T36 400 meter. Now this chart is mine. This wasn't generated from the database at all. This is, I've put these numbers together. So you just see how over time, so 2016, 2017, so I was world champs in London. 2018, you've got a bit slower time there. And then you've got a world record in 2019 at in Dubai. 2020 is a bit of an anomaly, and you'll see why. We all know why, but you'll see why on the rankings list. There's just not that many athletes that have competed this year. So then that's number 1 rank. This is number 3 rank. So you see what that time differential is between 1 and 3, right? You're able to take a look at that. See here, it was a 1 second differential. It's pretty small. Here was a bit of a larger differential. Okay, and then you look at top 8. So what is the significance of top 8? Well, ideally, there's 8 athletes in the final. So we would look at top 8. What does it take to be in the final at the Paralympic Games or at the World Championships? So what does that time look like? If you don't have a PR that's faster than 58:19, odds are it's going to be really hard to make that final, right? Now there's other elements we'll talk about that in a second, but you can see that difference though. That's a 7 second difference, just under a 7 second difference between first place and 8th place. So it's pretty tight field. If you look at this, you've got 54 to 57. So it was a pretty tight race in Rio. So now we drop it down to 20th rank. So this is a very deep field. This is one of the reasons why I picked this as an example. So you'll see there's only 6 people ranked on this list in 2020. So 2020 results are really not going to be something that are significant in the grand scheme of things going forward, right? There are a few people that have competed and that might show some fitness, but overall, well, if you look in the US, there's really no one on that list from the US. So there's 20th place, so we start to see that. So this is more for your developing athletes, right? And then if you're in 20th place, maybe if you're a high schooler, start looking at the U20 age group and U17 age group. If you're new to the sport, maybe look at what, are you close to 20? What's it take to be 15? What's it take to be top 10? That's how you start setting your goals. And then we look at top 30. So this is a very deep field. There's 30. And, saying that, it seems kind of funny, but if you think of able-bodied side of things, there's hundreds of athletes competing, and maybe on within a database of this nature. But in the Paralympic system, there's some classes where there's only 20 or 14 athletes that are competing worldwide who are licensed and classified. There might be more that are competing, but they might not have license and classification. Okay. The one thing I look at as well too, and from that database, you can see, I'm just going to scoot back here, date of birth. So we can start looking at these dates of birth, okay? So what's it take to be in the top 8, right? You've got a spread from 86, 86, 89, 96, 99. So there's a pretty good range there. So the top 8 average age is 25.4. So that's over this entire group, 2016 to 2020. It ranges every year, basically between 25 and 27. But there's a couple 16 and 17-year-old anomalies that are in there that have popped up, as well as a couple 33-year-olds too. So there are those outliers. But the key indicator then is this: it's the time, right? So if your performance is there, now if say you're 18 years of age and you're seeing your performances are in the top 30 or top 20, you've still got some time, right? 25. So it's amazing to be on a team at a young age, but the reality is your peak performance relative to your disability group, relative to athleticism, your physiology, this is a good indicator of that. So if you're panicking because you're 18 or 16 and you're not making the Paralympic team, don't panic. So if we looked at, Kathy can support this, if we looked at the seated throws, that age is going to be upwards of 35 years, potentially. So it's interesting. There are some outliers. Justin is one of them, young athlete. So as a 53, he's out there, right? But typically our seated throwers are much older. All right. Now, what's the significance of this? Why would I circle that? That is your A standard for Tokyo for 2020, 2021 now, in the 400 meter T36, number 3. Okay. All right. I hope that's they're getting you guys thinking a little bit there, right? It can be super exciting. And if you take that, and I'm not savvy enough to do the graphs on spreadsheets, it takes me a while to do that. But you can plot those performances and then plot your own performances. So look at where your progression is going. If it's headed in this direction, that's good. As a coach, I'm happy with that. Full stop. In coaching, you take an athlete from here, you want to get them here or way up here. But it takes progression, it takes forward movement to do that. If your performance is this or this, then you need to start having some good conversations with your coach, or taking a look at what your program has to offer. Are you doing the same things over and over and over again and not getting new results? Well, that's not the greatest training program to be in. All right. Now, considerations. So if we're looking at some longitudinal data, some data over time, there's going to be some blips or some things that happen, right? So for example, the breaking out, so the 42s and 44s post Rio. Was post Rio, right, Kathy, or was it post 2017?
Post 2017.
2017. So amputees who use prosthetics to run are now in the 63, 64 class. So that's a separate ranking list you have to pull apart, because typically in some of the races, there is a combination of those athletes still. So you just have to know that, and it'll be indicated on selection criteria and those kinds of things. You'll see a parentheses with a slash with the two classes. For your seated throwers, you're going to have combined classes. So say your 53s, 54s in shot put, your 55s, 56s in discus, your 56, 57s in shot put as well. Your club throwers, you're going to be combined in some of those classes. So make sure you're pulling in the right data sets, or else you're going to get a false indication of what the realities are. Now, if you're a 40 and there's a 40-41 classification combination, typically those 41s are competing much higher level than the 40s are. But if you're a 40 and you're in the mix with those 41s, that's a really good indicator for you. So just knowing those little pieces so you're not building false hope or setting false goals by using the wrong data set. And then track events. There are very few combined class track events, but there are some indicated on World Parathletics scheduling and those kinds of things, because they want to show that those events are open. So say a 32 combined with a 33, or a 51 combined with a 52 on the track. Okay, what also you can see is there are significant locations of where performances happen, right? So as I said, with Rio, with the 36 men's 400 meters, there was a really tight margin between first and third. It was a really tight race. So that happened in Rio. But you can also look at other spots around the world. So Arbonne for wheelchair racers, typically good performances, because it's the wheelchair race of the world, basically. Everyone shows up to race there. So if you want to take that step to that next level, you're going to have to plan ahead and make that investment to go to Switzerland to compete at that meet. There's some events in Great Britain where there's a lot of athletes with cerebral palsy. You can start to look at that through the rankings lists. If you're a seated thrower, there's a meet in Morocco where there's a ton of athletes that come there to compete. It's not a Grand Prix meet, that meets in Tunisia, so maybe they go there as well too. So just looking at where those performances are, you can start to determine those locations. The one thing that you can track too, if you're a super nerd and you want to go on the rankings regularly, you can download those rankings and see as people's performances pop up. So say there is a Grand Prix in Tunisia or in Phoenix, and those rankings will pop up after that event. But that means those athletes, if they were previously ranked, those ranks are going to go away. So you can actually start to track that if you really want to spend the time and energy to do that. It's a rare few people that'll have that time and energy to do, but hey, if that's what you want to do, that's all right. And endurance races. So if you're an ambulatory endurance runner, the group effort sometimes helps those athletes achieve better performances. So say you get a hot race with a bunch of T12, 1500 meter runners, T13, 1500 meter runners, and there's 5 guys that are there and they're all in close times, and you can hook into that pack, and sometimes you'll get pulled to a great performance. So those are just a few of considerations. The other thing to take from it are the athletes' ages, right? I spoke to that before. So if you're 16 years old, if you're 18 years old, and you look at that rankings list and everybody else is 5 years older than you, is 6 years older than you, maybe Tokyo shouldn't be where your gaze is cast. Yes, it might be the icing on the cake, might be a little cherry on top of the sundae, but maybe it's Paris, maybe it is LA, right? So yes, you go to Tokyo, or you go to World Championships in Japan in 2022, or something like that, or maybe it's World Juniors in 2022 if they're going to have it. Haven't been announced yet, but you know, those kinds of things, like just you start to get that capture looking at the year of birth of the other athletes. Your sport age, or the sport age of an athlete, this one's a little harder to determine. This is where you can really start to do some investigation. So for that 36 men's 400 meters, there was a guy that came in and ran 52 seconds. The world record before that was 54 seconds. Where did he come from? Was he on the rankings list before? Do a little Google search. Oh, he was a CP soccer player. Oh, that explains it. Yeah, soccer players are great 400-meter runners. He's in Australia. Oh, that explains it too. They have an amazing talent transfer system in Australia. They have amazing coaches. They have training centers. That's why this guy's doing well. So just kind of looking at these pieces of the puzzle. Doing a web search. What stuff our athletes are putting a lot on Instagram and social media? Do you follow them, or do you have a friend follow them? Be a little covert maybe. Or a lot of countries will promote their athletes. If they're top 5 in the world rank, a smaller nation like say Namibia, for example, or Ivory Coast or Costa Rica, they're going to promote those athletes, and you're going to be able to find stories about them online. And if you know the history of your event, if you know who the good coaches are, who have had athletes perform in the past, those are kind of things that you can start to look at as well. So your country, the region of origin of the athlete, I spoke to it there about Australia. If you're an amputee, and there's an amputee in your classification on the rankings list from Australia, from New Zealand, from Germany, from the Netherlands, from USA, right? There's good access to prosthetic technologies. From Japan as well, good access to prosthetic technologies and prosthetists. So you're seeing those athletes move quickly through the rankings because they've got coaches who have seen success in the past. They've got prosthetists that understand how to set up running legs and jumping legs appropriately. Same with seated throwers as well. The Czech Republic, Iran, GB, Australia, like there's just a lot of countries over the years that you'll see have had athletes that have moved through the rankings and performed well. So don't use that as a point of stress, but start Googling those people. See if you can find them in videos. What does their chair setup look like? Are they putting workout videos online? Those kinds of things. Really do the research. The number of athletes, back when I was with the Canadian team, we would ask our athletes at our development camp, we'd actually assign them homework over the camp. At the last day of the camp, they would come and they would present on their event. Who else is out there? What are they doing? Where are they throwing? How do I get better? And then we would have a discussion amongst our group of athletes. So these are just the things to start doing amongst your teammates or through social media, talking to your other teammates and getting each other excited for potential, for your athletic potential. And, you know, LA 2028, it's coming fast and furious, right? So how are we moving towards having an amazing performance in the USA in 2028? So here we go. Kind of alluded to that, access to sports science. So you'll see some of those countries that are performing, UK or GB, Australia. Some of these countries have really good access to sports science. The Ukraine, if you're an athlete with cerebral palsy or in the endurance races, often there's a lot of Ukraine athletes. So looking at those. Okay, so on to the next piece, asking better questions. This is where it kind of, you got to reflect. You got to look inward a little bit, and you got to sit down with your coach and bring some good questions to them, right? Where do I want to be? Like, am I 40th right now? Am I top 10 right now? Am I third right now? What do I have to do? What is it that I'm going to have to do to get to that next level? And am I willing to make that commitment? If you're not willing to make that commitment, am I okay with improving my performance year after year after year? That's important too. That's, you know, I wanted to run at the Olympic Games, but no way I was going to ever do that, but I went out and I trained hard every day and I improved my performance. That was just my goal. There's no such thing as a bad meet. There was always learning to happen at a meet. So, you know, whether performance was what I wanted or not, there was always some technical thing that I could find that I did well. So what does your training environment look like? Now, right now, this is a bad time for all that across the country, around the world. A lot of places are at home training, but there's a lot that can be done in your house at home, right? Do you have a group of athletes that you're able to train with? Are there other people in your community? Is it something that you need to look at getting together with other athletes, getting to a space where you're able to train with other athletes? Is this something that you need to do to move forward? What is your coaching situation like? Do you have a coach who is able to give you immediate feedback? That is most ideal. Realistically, it may not happen for you. Are you able to send your coach's video? How are you able to develop that coaching communication pathway with you and your coach so you understand what they're giving you to train, and then you're able to do what they are prescribing? Okay. What does your programming look like? Are you in a sophisticated training program? Is your coach trained in coaching track and field? Or do they have a USATF certification? Have they done the para coaching program put on by US Para Track and Field? Is there an understanding of what you're doing, and is it specific and prescribed, and are you progressing through your programming? Equipment. Do you have a racing chair or a throwing frame that is specific to you, or are you using a borrowed chair? There's lots of grant opportunities to get equipment in this country now. What are we doing to provide that equipment to ourselves, or how are we getting there? Do you have a prosthetist or a coach who has an eye for prosthetics, or a contact who knows what they're doing with prosthetics to be able to help you set up your leg appropriately, or to get you in the best starting block position? There's a lot that you can do by watching athletes. There's a lot of World Parathletics or IPC videos online to watch what other athletes are doing. So what is it that they're doing, and is there a way for you to test that, to play around with it and see what works for you?
So David, a lot of times there's video available from a world championship of your race, and you could watch what a world champion does, and what the third place does, and what the 8th place does. And that's just a Google search.
100%. Go on YouTube, and if you find one race from an event, look at what the title of it is from World Parathletics, copy and paste that title, but then put in your race and classification, and it should come up quickly and easily. Yeah, that's a great point. So then we look at what are our opportunities for growth. And I kind of went over a few of these. These are these gaps, okay? I didn't specifically label it, but these are these gaps that you're going to be able to start to fill in to progress. Some of them are physical, right? Are you fully grown? Are you, do you have the body type that's right for your event? Have you watched them race? Are you an endurance runner? Maybe you should look at throws. Or are you a sprinter? Maybe you should look at endurance. Is the endurance offered for you? Those kinds of things. For a seated thrower, what do the other throwers look like in your classification? Are you able to see that? Physiological side of it. So looking at from a programming standpoint, are you able to work in that lactic threshold to get to a level where you're able to sprint the final 400 meters of an 800 or a 1500? Do you have the fast twitch muscles to be able to do a 100-meter sprint or to do a long jump approach? Are those attributes that you have, and are they trainable? Have you done that? If you have a young sport age, if you've not done sport, you might have access to that and you just don't know it because you've never been pushed or pushed to try. Biomechanically, what does your form look like? What does your technique look like? Are you able to finish a race with good form? He who slows down slowest wins the race. Typically, you have to be there fastest though. But if you are not slowing down or getting tied up at the finish line, by keeping good form and good technique? And what feedback are you getting on those biomechanics pieces? Does your coach know what to look for if you're a wheelchair racer? There's a lot of great programs around the country who have coaches who are very willing to share information, give feedback. Technique, again, as a thrower, are you practicing proper positions in your technique? For a seated thrower, are you utilizing your abdominals? Do you have abdominals to use? Are you able to hit those positions repeatedly and consistently to elicit a great throw? Competition. Where are you competing and who are you competing against? Those are key things. I know a lot of para athletes who compete very few times in a year. There are opportunities out there. It's a matter of you or your program going and making connections to try and find more competitions. And whether it's competing against able-bodied athletes, maybe competing on your own, which isn't awesome, but you can still learn from competing on your own. It's the routine of getting ready to race. It's the preparation. Am I warmed up? Am I activated enough? Those are key things in competition that you can learn, but not even get to the race. So those are elements to look at as well. Do you get enough competitions in a year to know that you're going to be able to perform at your best level when it comes to count, whether it's at trials, juniors, world juniors, or Paralympic Games? Race tactics, this comes down to competition. Are you familiar with the draft? Are you comfortable in the draft as a wheelchair racer? Are you able to be that real nice and close and stick behind the person in front of you to use that advantage of drafting? Are you an ambulatory endurance runner? And are you familiar with the surges and the kicks and all those things? So that just comes from competing as well too. And then from a health standpoint, psychological health. Are you in a good, healthy state of mind to be training every day, to have the fortitude to push your body hard at the finish? Are there things that you can be working on to reduce anxieties, to help you prepare better to race, to look at what you can control versus what you can't control? These are all things that you can train, and your psychological health is something that everybody can always work on. So it's a potential growth opportunity there. Your nutritional health. Your body is a high performance engine. Are you putting high octane fuel in it, or are you loving it at McDonald's? So if you're loving it at McDonald's and you don't want to put the nutritional piece in, then it's hard to expect a performance, specifically if you're a middle distance runner or a sprinter, that will be elicited by your body if you're putting those kind of nutrients into it. So, and is there someone to, it's not fad dieting, it's not these things. Is there someone you're able to work with who understands nutrition for performance to be able to get what you need out of your body to be able to train at a high level and also to recover and regenerate? This is one of the biggest things in Canada. When I was working with the Paralympic program, I also worked with the Olympic program from some mentorship standpoints. This was one of the biggest jumps I saw on the elite side of athletics, was recovery and regeneration. Are you resting appropriately? Are you cooling down appropriately? Are you getting massages if you need them? Are you using foam rollers? Those kinds of things. There's a lot of athletes that just aren't recovering properly. Are you sleeping well? Are you sleeping on a couch or a mattress that's beneficial for you? One of my mentors said, he was coaching a decathlete, and he said the first thing I had him do was buy a new mattress. And it helps immensely to sleep well. Think of all the recovery and regeneration you're doing, especially if you have chronic pain as well too, that's caused by sleeping. There are pain reducing mattresses out there to utilize. They might be a little more expensive, but think of that difference just in your everyday life. And back to competing beyond the Move United, Adaptive Sports USA meets and USOPC meets. Can you compete at your school? If it's a collegiate environment or a high school environment? Can you partner with a USATF club, maybe for training if it's local, or for a series of meets? Or is there another group that does competitions locally? The more you can compete, the better you understand your body, the better your coach sees how you react to stress and different situations, different environments, wind, rain, snow, all that stuff. For high school athletes, you know, they're not worrying about classification in high school sports, which is fine. That's awesome, because the experience is this: getting to competitions, learning how you compete, and being with teammates and having an awesome time. So that's just one of the huge benefits of high school track and field that I see. So I'm going to flip the script a little bit. Kathy here. We got about 10 minutes left, I see. So I'm going to burn through this pretty quick so you guys see and understand just how to access U.S. track and field ranks and standards. So on U.S. Paralympic site, you're going to go to sport right there. You're going to go track and field, click that. You're going to go U.S. rankings here, okay? And that'll get you to this. You see all these rankings. Kudos to Kathy for putting all this stuff together in the past. It's not an easy undertaking to track everyone's performances. And there's multiple performances per athlete on those rankings as well. So you can get a good capture of those other athletes. Okay, so just downloading them. And there is a link, this is a clickable link as well to World Para-Athletics World Rankings too. Now remember I said the proof of performance form? That's the other one, is submitting that proof of performance form. All right, this one's the Tokyo selection criteria. So on the side here, selection procedures, and then your Tokyo Paralympic Game athlete selection procedures. Read it with your coach, with your family members. It's prescriptive in nature. It's pretty simple if you sit down to follow. It's I've seen athletes show up at trials and they're like, oh my gosh, I hope I make the team. Meanwhile, they're the #2 ranked person in the country, and they will have to have a very bad performance to make that team. But so realistically, that person should come in and be like, hey, I'm confident if I do what I've always done, I'm going to be able to do this. So it's just that matter of understanding and education that really helps people. And then where are the track and field standards? So athlete and sport information, so it's under US Para Track and Field. And then you're going to click on this athlete sport program plan, and it's on the last, well, you'll find it within there. I can't remember what page number it's on, but I've got this saved on my phone because I'm always looking up standards and always looking up the gradation of standards to help people. So, all right. 52 minutes, a little chatty there, but I think, I hope that that was valuable to people. And Cindy, I think you're gonna pull some questions off here. Hopefully we've done all right.
Yep, no, all good. Let me see. David, how did your coaching journey start? What made you stay on with this journey?
Oh, wow. So my journey started in 1999. I was a collegiate track and field athlete, and there was a guy by the name of Jeff May who showed up at a track practice, and he started training with my training group. And one day, I don't know, a few months down the road, he came up and he said, my coach just quit. And when I was like, oh man, that sucks, I'm sorry to hear that. And he's like, yeah, people think you would be a good coach. And I was like, you're a wheelchair racer? I don't know what's going on. I'm a hurdler. I was like, yeah, why not? Let's give it a shot. And then this door opened for me, and this whole Paralympic movement was there. And there was a club program locally. I became a guide runner. This was 99, 2000. There was about 5 athletes that were in this local program. And then I met some amazing coaches. And being a young coach, I have a sport management background. I have a master's in sport management. And all of a sudden I felt this push behind me through the Canadian coaching system and just fell in love with it. Absolutely. So yeah, and it's through a lot of great mentors like Kathy, and yeah, being able to continually learn. And I met my wife through this as well too. So that keeps you involved as well. So yeah.
All right, thanks. Do we have any other questions? You did such a...
Yeah, so David, what is one thing that one piece of advice that you would give any athlete who really wants to move up in the ranks?
Wow. Do the work, like if you're, and be honest with yourself. So if you're training once a week, if you don't have a strength program, or if you like, there's components to being an athlete who's able to move through the system. If you're putting in practice irregularly, if you're just kind of not taking it seriously. It's been amazing to see once an athlete, once it clicks and they're like, hey, I've got potential here. Hey, I want this. They get hungry and find people that will help feed that hunger. Whether it's Cindy or whether it's getting involved in a local program, or whether it's, they'll help connect you with those pieces that we talked about, the equipment, the access to, like Adam and his crew at Illinois, those mentors, and ask lots of questions. That's a big thing. Athletes and coaches that are curious, they do well. And the best coaches I find out there are ones who want to share information. They want to help. They want to see people improve. And athletes wise, a lot of athletes who have got to that international level, they want to see more athletes come through the system. They want to actually compete for their spots on the team. So often they'll give good advice also.
Okay, we've got some more questions. Can you explain the difference between the US standards you mentioned and the adaptive track and field standards they use for juniors, masters, and open? Many parents are confused.
Yep. So US Paralympic track and field is a teams and games focused organization, basically. Those standards are selection onto the national team, which means access to funding. So that's that B standard. The A standard is kind of the determinant onto major games teams. And then their emerging, or their entry standard for national championships kind of is that gateway to the trials, which can get you onto those teams. Okay, so the Adaptive Sports USA, they're the development wing for para track and field in the USA, and they've got regional games, and they have a junior nationals, and all of those standards apply to that part of the system, basically. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that the closer you are to the national team A, the more opportunity you're going to have to make a national team.
Yeah, or
an international.
Yeah.
Yes. World championships, any of the major, anything sponsored by WPA, the IPC, the Paralympic Games are all going to be run through the standards from US Paralympics.
Yep. And then the IWAS games are what Adaptive Sports USA would take a team to the IWAS games as well too. And I'm not as familiar with that piece, but I know Cindy's very involved with Adaptive Sports USA and understands that piece. So it just kind of depends on the level, the gradation of the athlete. If you're making those US para track and field standards, you're on the door to the international. Okay. If you're kind of below those standards and the Adaptive Sports USA standards, that's junior nationals. It's more of just getting you moved through that pipeline to get you potentially to that international level.
And the other thing with Move United standards, that's a lot of junior standards. With USOPC, they don't care about the age.
Right.
You have to be at least 14 to compete, but other than that, there's no limit. So it's not broken down by an age group.
Right. Yeah, and I meant to mention that earlier too. To get on the World Para Athletics ranking standards, the minimum age to be classified is 14. So if you're under 14, Adaptive Sports USA, Move United, that's your jam, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I would also add that although junior nationals are canceled this year, that they are now World Para approved. So if you are an elite athlete and you want to move up on those rankings, and you want another competition and you're under 23, that is a good competition. And another one to move up on those rankings if it fits into your competition calendar.
Any competition is good competition.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I knew a guy who was a 30-year-old above the knee amputee. He was the world record holder at one time, and he used to race against 12-year-old males, not because he could beat them, but because they were right around his time, and he needed them to be pushing him, and he was okay with that. And that's awesome that he was that humble about it. He knew he'd get blown out of the water by his own age group, so he knew that was the target age. So sometimes focusing on those target times to compete is okay also.
Very cool. Do you have to be classified in order for any of the stats to be recorded?
For World Parathletics, so you have to have the license, that's the first thing, and you need a passport to get a license. And then you have to get an international classification to be recorded on the World Parathletics level. To get to trials, so for next year, for Tokyo trials, you have to have a World Parathletics classification to be able to compete at trials as well. So that's kind of that entryway, that gateway a little bit. So yeah.
Sometimes the U.S. rankings will have
Well, that's right.
some of the athletes that are just nationally classified.
Right.
Okay. For a high school senior, T13, will the times count toward pair rankings at the state meet?
They typically do. I believe. Yeah.
If you filled out the form,
Right.
to request that for, there's a form on the website that you fill out, and you would say, I would like this meet to be IPC approved. It doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
It's just putting that competition on the listing. And if once it's on the listing, it can count. So we like to restrict that to any major high school meet. You don't want to do it for a dual meet, or it needs to be a good quality meet that has a wind gauge, has a FAT, fully automatic time, all of that. So any major high school competition can be IPC approved. So yes, Owen, it could be approved and could be count on the rankings.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you tell coaches who are new to this area and helping to get involved coaching them?
Just hoping to get involved coaching in the area, or I guess figure. Well, my email's on the screen right now. Just start your coaching network and just start asking questions, and people are willing to reach out to help you. And if you're new, if you're a track and field coach coaching para athletes for the first time, the athlete knows their disability the best. Learn from them. You know track and field. And it's building a level of trust and communication with the athlete to understand that the work they're putting in is, that it's not counterintuitive or it's something that's going to injure them. If you're brand new to coaching track and field, I would recommend just getting some coaching books, start reading, start following some track and field websites or Instagram, like just start diving into it and learning about what your area of interest is. For me, I started as a wheelchair racing coach, became a guide runner, and when I moved to the US here, at one point we had 13 seated throwers, and then I was coaching Rachel Morrison, who's a seated thrower, and now I've got I'm coaching coaches now who work with throwers, ambulatory, seated, and I've got long jumpers. So it's kind of, you'll evolve and kind of be a generalist eventually. Depends on how robust your program is and who's coming in the door that day sometimes. So yeah.
I would also add that any of our programs that, whether it's David's or, there's the track and field programs across the country, we are, as well as always looking for athletes, we're always looking for coaches. So I'm not sure what geographic area, but if you email me, we can definitely connect you to a program in your area. So always looking to grow the movement. Another question.
I'm a real big fan of the coaching and education programs that are offered by USOPC. They have a how to training modifications for para athletes. Also, USATF Level 1 gives you a broad background of traditional track and field, which will help with your ambulatory athletes. It's not going to be specific to para, but you can pick up the para specific by taking the training modifications for para athletes.
And through USATF, you also learn how to construct a practice and learn more about training and biomechanics and those kinds of things as well.
Great resources. What about if you haven't been given a reclassification appointment yet? Can you be on the rankings if you had an international classification originally? I don't know. Charisse, I think is on here. I know, that's what I just said. Charisse, answer.
I don't know whether I see her.
I think she's on. While we wait for that, there's another question in chat that I'm gonna quickly look at. Hold on a second. I gotta find it in here. I was told it was in here.
It's
Justin, if you.
Yeah, there's a huge focus on helping young athletes and youth competitions, but what about athletes that start in their 30s who are older but are young in their competition careers?
Justin Kane, I know Justin Kane. All right, Justin. Yeah, man, it's just you've been doing good work, and it's just working with your coach and training hard, and yeah, just doing the things to push to get to that next level, looking at your nutrition, looking at your flexibility, looking at your strength, and working closely with your coach and getting feedback all the time. I think that's, and getting out to compete. So I think you're in Michigan, right? So
yeah, he's Michigan.
Yeah, being able to get to some of those open competitions and just throwing down some jumps and doing some throws and doing some sprints. So yeah, seeing what and where you want to do, and then maybe looking at where you want to focus as well too. So.
And Justin, I think that's affirmation of what you are doing. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have faith in the plan. Yeah. Yeah. Have faith in that plan, Justin, too. You've got good people around you. So it's just sometimes it's a slow burn. Other times it comes quickly.
Well, it looks like that is it for questions. David and Kathy, I think you did a tremendous job. And yes. So David's email is up here. If any of you have additional questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll look forward to hopefully 2021 and getting more competitions live. So Kathy and David, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I was going to answer one on that international classification. I don't know that they know about the reclassification, how that's going to work, if they're going to delay that a year, or if they're going to have to delay somehow. And so I don't think there's an answer to that. I don't know if it happened after Tokyo, if it happened before Tokyo. So that's out there. The one thing I think I like to see athletes compete more, and then after they compete, look at what they could do to improve their performance. Thing that they think that would have helped them in that competition if they would have done it. So always be thinking about, how can I improve my performance? What make it better for the next time?
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, having that growth mindset is key. I think it's just being able to always be in that learning mindset. Every rep at practice, every practice itself, every event competition that you do, I think that's the biggest thing. And ultimately, you might not make the Paralympic Games. Like Team USA it's really hard to make that team. It's one of the hardest standards. But if you love the sport and you love what you're doing and you're growing and improving, that's awesome, right? So many of your able-bodied peers would love to go to the Olympic Games, but it's just not a reality sometimes. And in the Paralympic system, we sometimes forget that there is that performance curve, right? Where there's your high performers and then your folks who physically just aren't there. But there's a lot of people who have a lot of fun doing it. So I think, you know, I love the sport that we're in, because the person who's dead last in a race or in a competition can have the best performance that they've ever had in their life, and they're over the moon. So it's all about that perspective. So I think, yeah, there's a growing interest in the sport continually. Initiatives like this, and now with Move United in the mix, hopefully we're headed in a direction where we're going to see a groundswell of athletes, coaches, and opportunities. So it's exciting.
Great. Thank you both. And we'll hopefully see some of you on some other virtual sessions we go through Sunday afternoon. So, and we are doing the virtual relays. If you haven't signed up, we'd love to have you join us. So thank you, David and Kathy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.